Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. My grandfather, who was born 1849, when he died, my grandmother brought her 5 sons and daughter to Baltimore, no, to Fairfax, Virginia. And from Fairfax, Virginia, she brought them to Baltimore. And she raised her children in Baltimore. My childhood I was raised by my grandmother, because my mother had me when she was 16. And so my grandmother, she died. But before she died, she told her youngest daughter, who was 15 years older than me, she asked her to raise me. The first job I had was, I think I was around about 11, working with a fish man. He had a fish cart and go along the street, walk the street, hauling the fish, you know. And they paid me $1.25 a week. And so when I first got paid, my aunt took part of the money and gave me part. I bought myself a sports shirt for 45 cents and had money to go to movies. Movies were 10 cents at the time. And 10 cents for movies, 5 cents to spend for candy. And I was bragging and said, boy, and I'm buying my own clothes now. I went into the maritime service. I saw an advertisement, and I followed through and joined the maritime service when I was 17 years old. Took my training at Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, New York. Anyway, around the last part of the training, we had to take a training ship to St. Petersburg, Florida. And I was elected of the crew because they only took so many. They took those with the highest test scores. And we ran into a hurricane down there. The main mast got broke and the ship was weaving from side to side, and so much on one side that the lifeboats on the top deck got filled with water. And it was a hard time, but when we got to Florida, come to find out, we were looking forward, rather, to go on the shore. And my first time being in Florida, and going to the shore and going to the beach, you know. And when we got there, the captain of the ship went ashore to get our passes to go to town. And he came back to the ship, gave everybody their pass, and he said, Marcus Jackson, first of all, I want you to know this is not my doing. But the captain of the base said if I had any colors on the ship, they could not come ashore. And so, anyway, making a long story short, I start crying. My buddy start cussing. The next day, when we had to come ashore, to come on the base, come to find out we were the first blacks. At that time we were colored. The first colored ever to spend a night on that base. And we spent 4 nights. My mother and her mother were friends from school time. And they were both teenagers when they had children. And so my mother took me to her mother's house, and I met my wife, her mother, and my wife there, which was not wife at the time, she was a little girl. And I didn't recall seeing her no more until I had gotten out of the service. I was around about 18 or 19, something like that. You know? I saw her at a dance. At a dance. And we talked, you know. She knew my mother. She called my mother Aunt Gladys, you know. And so we talked, and I took her home. And from there, it got more and more involved until I married her. I was raised up in the church by my grandmother. And my grandmother, because my mother was a teenager, my grandmother took over. I was 5. She died when I was 5, grandmother. But before she died, she asked her youngest daughter, who was 15 years older than me, her youngest daughter, to take me and raised me. And she did. She continued on, kept me in the church. And I stayed in the church until after I got grown enough to leave and go out on my own, you know. But as I was saying this morning to my congregation, the Bible says, train a child in the way you will have it to go. And when it gets old, it will not depart. That does not mean that the child won't go astray, won't depart. But that training, that what you put in it, that will always remain. And so because of that, when trouble comes, that training kicks in. You know where to come to get your help. I preached my trial sermon just before my 27th birthday. And from there on, so by 27 I was preaching and still preaching. And later on, I was raised up in the Pentecostal Holiness Church. And some friends of mine who was a Methodist, he encouraged me to come and work with him. So he was a United Methodist. And so I worked with him as his associate pastor. And from there, I went through the training, you know, and became a United Methodist pastor. The fire department opened up to blacks in 1954. I came in 1956. But they only let a few in at a time. The class ahead of me was a class of 49. It was nine blacks. My class was 26. There's 6 blacks. And so that's how we came in. And when they assigned us to a company, they assigned one here, one there, one over here, and when the numbers began to grow, they would put like one on one shift, one on another shift. It kept you separated as much as possible, man. We had separate beds, separate wash bowls, separate toilets, you know. Some firehouses had separate tables. They couldn't sit at the same table to eat. A minister by the name of Marion Bascom was the first black fire commissioner. And when he became the commissioner, the blacks told him what was going on. He had a meeting at the fire academy where everybody went to the fire academy and they began to throw up, you know. They just everybody throwing up, you know, telling him all the things that was going on. And he made changes. First of all, he made them take down all those reserve signs. All those reserve signs had to come down. And and start placing blacks where they, their seniority had demanded for them to go, putting them in positions, and from that, some of the blacks became lieutenants, captains, chiefs. You know what I mean? I just retired after 25 years of service, and start full-time pastoring. The opening came. I saw an opening for a chaplain. I applied for it. And I got in. So I became the first firefighter paramedic to retire and come back as chaplain. The first time was 1956, called the Blizzard of '56. It was a snow blizzard. The weatherman called for a light dusting, but it wound up being a blizzard. Okay? And I went to a fire downtown in a building downstairs called it the Beehive. It was so hot up there that I came in behind the officer, and I was by the window when my officer ran past me and jumped out. He said, "I'm getting this so out of here," and jumped out the window head first, going down the ladder, head first. And I reached out behind him and I grabbed him by the feet. I held on to him. While I'm holding on to him, the flames were shooting out over my head. And hose company number 1 put their hose line in the window over my head and knocked the fire down. I held on to him until the guys on the ground reached up to him and caught him by the shoulders, and loaded him and righted him into a pile of snow. And behind that thing, I became Fireman of the Year. The second time, I was a paramedic in the ambulance, riding down the street, and I saw smoke coming out of a house on Hannibal Street. I stopped. I called it in on the radio, and I went in the building and found a man in there, and I got him out. That was my second time to be Fireman of the Year, man.
Okay.
To my grandchildren and my great-grands and my posterity, be thou faithful unto death, and God will give you a crown of life. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long. I did that, and my days have been long.